"You're just taking up space," my son said, without raising his voice, as if those words were perfectly reasonable. I stood there holding a basket of unfolded laundry, my back aching so much I hadn't slept for 2 nights. And that was the moment I stopped being afraid to leave. He had just come home from work, loosening his tie, still in the hallway, when I said, carefully, almost apologetically, "Daniel, I think I need a break. Just a couple of afternoons a week when I don't have the kids. My back—" I didn't finish. He turned, sighed like a man whose coffee had gone cold, and muttered it. "Then you're just taking up space." That sentence didn't land like a slap. It landed like a conclusion. I walked back into the kitchen, sat down at the edge of the chair I'd been wiping crumbs off of for 3 years, and stared at the floor. The kids were still shouting upstairs. The dishwasher beeped. Nothing had changed, except me. 3 years ago, I moved into help for a while when their first child was born. I brought my suitcase and my knitting bag and thought, how lucky I am to be needed. But that evening, I realized I'm not needed. I'm used. "Dinner's late again," Emily called from the living room. I didn't answer. I looked at my hands instead. The skin was thinner, the veins like roads on a worn map. These hands had rocked Daniel to sleep, had cooked his favorite stew when he had the flu, and now they couldn't be trusted to open a jar without flinching. I took out the ibuprofen I kept hidden in my purse, swallowed it dry. Didn't want Emily to see, didn't want to hear the word drama again. "You okay, Mom?" Daniel finally asked, walking into the kitchen, his voice rehearsed. I looked up at him. "I just need a little rest, that's all." He gave a tight smile. "We all do," and left the room. I sat there for a long time after everyone had gone to bed. Just sat, breathing in the smell of detergent and old carpet, and something else. Something heavy, like silence turning into certainty. The plan was never to stay. I remember telling that to myself every morning for the first few weeks. Just until Emily recovers. Just until Daniel settles into fatherhood. Just until the baby sleeps through the night. Then came the second baby. By then, my things had long since disappeared into drawers I didn't choose. My clothes hung behind theirs in the upstairs closet. My pillow was one I'd brought from my old apartment, the only piece left of that life. My books, my favorite tea, even the photo of my late husband remained sealed in boxes in their garage. "We'll make space for them soon," Daniel had said. That was 2.5 years ago. When I first arrived, I had a room. Then Emily's office needed more space, so they moved me downstairs to the den. "Just for now," she said, folding the futon herself. "It's quieter down here anyway." It was also cold in the winter and stuffy in the summer, with no windows and a light that buzzed. I didn't complain. I told myself families make sacrifices. I told myself mothers do what's needed. But slowly, helping became expected. Diapers, laundry, dinner, school pickup, bath time, packing lunches. I had a schedule tighter than I'd ever had while working, except now there was no paycheck, no weekends, no appreciation, just a never-ending loop of being there and being silent. They didn't mean to be cruel, I think. They just stopped seeing me. Emily would pass by and ask, "Did you manage to clean the bathroom today?" Never. "How are you feeling?" Daniel would call from the car. "Mom, we're going to be late. Can you pick up the dry cleaning too?" Never. "Do you want to come with us on Saturday?" And I said yes. Always yes. Even when my back started giving out. Even when I missed my doctor's appointments. Even when I lay in bed some nights and cried without knowing exactly why. I remember one afternoon, this was maybe 6 months ago, I overheard Emily on the phone in the kitchen. "No, we don't pay her. She lives here for free. Honestly, it works for both of us. She needs the company, and we need the help. She needs the company." I sat in the den that night, surrounded by unfolded clothes and puzzle pieces, and thought, is that how they justify it to themselves? That I'm lucky to be near my grandchildren, and that's payment enough? I didn't say anything then. I just folded the shirts and placed them in neat piles, even though my hands were shaking. I started timing my days by the ache in my spine. Morning stiffness meant it was Tuesday, when both kids had early dismissal and the house filled with noise by 2 p.m. The sharp, stabbing pain meant it was Friday, laundry day, when I had to bend over a dozen times to sort and fold. The dull throb that spread down my leg? That was Sunday, the supposed rest day, when Emily hosted brunch for her friends, and I played the silent shadow in the kitchen, pretending not to hear the way they spoke about needy relatives who don't understand boundaries. Nobody ever said those words directly to me, but they didn't need to. It's strange how the mind adapts to daily indignity. I no longer thought of myself as someone with preferences. I simply became part of the machinery of their household, like the coffee maker or the Roomba. I woke early, made breakfast, dressed the children, unloaded the dishwasher, folded laundry, prepared lunch, kept the younger one from drawing on the walls, reheated leftovers for dinner, tidied up after everyone had gone to bed. My name, Miri, became a code word. I'd hear Emily say it on the phone. "Don't worry, Miri will handle it." As if I were a service, not her husband's mother. Daniel never corrected her. He didn't even notice. Once, when the doorbell rang and I was elbow deep in dish soap, Emily turned to me with that patient, clipped tone she reserved for tasks she'd rather not dirty herself with. "Could you get that, Mary? Could you? Not would you? Not please?" I dried my hands and opened the door to find the grocery delivery man holding 5 heavy bags. He gave me a look, tired, apologetic, maybe even pitying, as I reached for the paper bags, trying not to wince. Behind me, Emily's voice floated from the living room. "Just put the perishables in the fridge. The rest can wait." It was always like that. Small requests that stacked up like chairs in an empty hall. But it wasn't just the chores. It was how invisible I'd become in my own narrative. When friends came over, friends from Emily's yoga group or Daniel's work, I was never introduced. I was background. Once someone asked if I was the help. "The help," I repeated later that night, sitting on my futon, whispering the words into the dark. I felt more object than woman. Even the children, sweet as they could be, absorbed the tone of the house. My grandson once looked up from his tablet and asked, "Grandma, are you going to live here forever?" The way he said it, wide-eyed and curious, wasn't cruel, but the question landed anyway. I didn't know how to answer. Then came the night that sealed everything. Emily was upstairs yelling about something, missing socks, I think. Daniel was on the phone in the kitchen, talking too loudly, like he always did when trying to sound more important than he felt. I was in the hallway, sorting coats. I wasn't meant to hear it. "I don't know, Em," he said into the phone. "She's just always here, like part of the furniture. Honestly, if she stopped helping, I don't know what we'd do. But also, sometimes I feel like she's just taking up oxygen." Oxygen. I didn't move. I stood frozen, hand on a child's puffer jacket, while that word looped in my brain. Oxygen. I went to bed without dinner that night. I couldn't taste anything anyway. The next morning, I woke early, made breakfast, dressed the children, cleaned the kitchen. I did everything exactly as usual, but inside, something had cracked clean through. The quiet voice that had whispered doubts for years now stood up and spoke plainly. This is not a home. This is a position you were assigned and can be dismissed from at will. I didn't cry. I was too tired. That afternoon, I took a long walk to the park. It was cold. My knees protested. But I needed the air. I watched couples pass by, older women in pairs with thermoses, mothers with strollers. I sat on a bench for nearly an hour. No one called to check on me. When I came back, dinner was half burnt. Emily was irritated. Where were you? I had a meeting. You know I can't watch both kids at once. I looked at her face, flushed and annoyed, and said nothing. Later, in the den, I pulled out the old suitcase I'd brought with me 3 years ago, the one I never fully unpacked. I laid it open on the futon. It smelled like the cedar sachets I'd tucked inside, the only thing that still smelled like me. Then I reached for the drawer where we kept the spare keys. I didn't pack quickly. It wasn't a dramatic escape. No slammed drawers, no flurry of movement. Just a quiet, deliberate collection of things that still belonged to me. A cardigan I'd knitted years ago, now faded but warm. My worn wallet with a zipper that stuck. A comb. A pair of socks that still had my initials stitched in the hem. A habit I picked up when Daniel was a child and left everything behind at school. I sat on the futon, suitcase half full, and opened the small box I kept beneath the bed. It was dusty and wrapped in a plastic bag. Not from neglect, but from fear of intrusion. Inside were the remnants of who I used to be. A slim notebook with old poems I never showed anyone. A tiny gold ring that no longer fit, but once meant freedom. And 2 photographs. One of Daniel, age 8, grinning with his front teeth missing, holding a paper dragon we'd made together during a stormy afternoon. And one of Robert, my late husband, in his faded army jacket, standing with his hand on my shoulder the day we signed the lease on our first apartment. He died too young, but in all our years together, he never once made me feel like I was in the way. I traced my fingers over Robert's face and whispered, "You wouldn't have let this happen." Then I put the pictures in the side pocket of my suitcase. I wasn't leaving them behind. Upstairs, laughter echoed. Emily on the phone probably, or maybe one of her shows. Everything in that house always had noise. TVs, tablets, the baby monitor even when no one was crying. But none of it ever reached me. Not really. I looked around the den, the room that had never been mine. The walls were bare. The air smelled faintly of detergent and tiredness. The only mark I'd left in that space was a small dent in the futon where I sat every evening with aching knees and swollen hands. There was a time, not long ago really, when I would have seen leaving as a betrayal. When I'd have told myself that good mothers don't abandon their families, that grandmothers should be grateful just to be included. But those stories no longer fit. They pinched in all the wrong places. I wasn't abandoning anyone. I was returning to myself. I zipped the suitcase slowly, quietly, placed it near the door and sat down again, waiting for the house to fall asleep. Around midnight, I padded softly into the hallway. No creaks, no lights. The children were asleep. Emily and Daniel's door was closed. A faint hum of white noise came from the nursery. I opened the cabinet by the kitchen door and reached in. My hand closed around the cold metal of the spare key. It had always hung there, hooked on a red ribbon. Emily used to joke about how she hated the idea of anyone else holding keys to their home. "Except you, of course," she'd said once. "You're part of the house." Not anymore. I slipped the key into my coat pocket. Then I walked back into the den and lay down, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling. I couldn't sleep. Not from guilt. I'd done nothing wrong. But from a strange, almost exhilarating kind of fear. Like standing at the edge of a dock, knowing you're about to step into deep water after too many years on land. I didn't cry. My eyes were dry. My chest felt tight, but not from sadness. From resolve. By dawn, I was up again. The house was still asleep. I made coffee, not because I needed it, but because I always did. I fried eggs, sliced bread, laid out plates. My final act of service. I didn't do it out of spite. I just didn't want to leave chaos behind. When Daniel came downstairs, yawning, still tying his bathrobe, I was sitting at the table with my coat zipped and my suitcase at my feet. He blinked. Going somewhere? Yes. He looked at the suitcase, then back at me. Now? I nodded. I'm not staying here anymore. He rubbed the back of his neck. What? Why? We haven't even talked about… You said I was just taking up space. His mouth opened, then shut. For a second, I almost felt sorry for him. I didn't mean it like that, he mumbled. I know. You meant it exactly how you said it. He sighed. Mom, don't be dramatic. We've all been stressed. Emily's job, the kids, the house. I know, I interrupted. That's why I stayed as long as I did. But I'm done now. He shifted, defensive. You're not seriously leaving over one comment. It wasn't one, I said quietly. It was 100 small things. This house is full of them. He didn't answer, just stood there, robe half open, mouth tight. I took my cup to the sink, rinsed it, put on my gloves, picked up the suitcase, and walked out the door without looking back. I didn't walk fast. There was no need. The morning was cold, and the weight of the suitcase made me lean slightly to the left, but I welcomed the discomfort. It was mine. Mine to carry. Mine to choose. I made it 2 blocks before Daniel called. I let it ring. The third time, I picked up. Mom, he said, breathless. Where are you? On my way somewhere else, I answered. My voice didn't shake. I felt no need to comfort him. You didn't have to do this. I did, I said simply. A pause. Then, you didn't even say goodbye to the kids. I swallowed, felt the familiar guilt knock once at my ribs. Then I pushed it away. They were asleep, I said. And I wasn't going to wake them to explain something you should have explained a long time ago. That's not fair. I stopped walking and stood on the sidewalk, watching a bus pull away from the corner. Neither is what's been happening in that house for the last 3 years. I heard him exhale. Okay, look, can we just talk later? Maybe come back tonight and we'll all sit down together. Daniel, I said gently, there's no we right now. And I hung up. I didn't go to a hotel. I didn't have the energy to explain myself to a front desk clerk or figure out how to stretch a modest retirement fund across nightly rates. I called Evelyn. We hadn't spoken in nearly 6 years. The last time was at her sister's funeral, where we hugged too tightly and promised to meet soon, and of course never did. But I knew she still lived on the other side of town. Same apartment, same red door, same sharp voice that could cut through fog. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Miri? Hi, I said. It's me. Miri, she almost shouted. Lord, I thought you'd vanished. Are you all right? I left Daniel's place. A pause. You need a place to land? I closed my eyes. Just for a few nights. Get over here. You want coffee or tea? And that was that. I arrived an hour later. She answered the door in a robe and slippers, hair wrapped in a towel. Same as always. Her place smelled like cinnamon and cat litter, and I'd never loved a scent more. She didn't ask why I left. She didn't need to. Instead, she brought out a blanket, handed me a chipped mug of strong tea, and turned the living room lamp to its lowest setting. Only after I'd finished half the tea and taken off my shoes did she finally speak. "How long?" "3 years," I said. "Every day." She nodded. "Figures." "I thought it would feel like freedom," I said. "But right now it just feels like floating in space." "That's because they convinced you your gravity came from them." I looked at her, surprised. "What?" "You know," she said, shrugging, "that you only mattered because they needed you, not because you are you." I sat with that. She leaned back on the couch. "You know, you can stay longer than a few nights." "I'll find something," I said. "I need to stand on my own, Evelyn." She nodded, understanding in that way only old friends can, without more words. That night I slept on her couch. The cushions were lumpy, and the ticking of her kitchen clock kept me from falling into a deep sleep, but I didn't care. No one expected me to wake up early. No small feet came pounding down the hallway. No demands waited in the dark. I lay in the half-light and stared at the ceiling, listening to the wind brush the windows. I wasn't in anyone's way. The next morning, I made toast and eggs for both of us, out of habit, but also out of love. Evelyn protested, of course, called me dramatic, but cleaned her plate like she hadn't eaten in days. I spent the rest of the morning calling a few numbers. A friend from church gave me the name of a landlord who rented to retirees. A kind man, apparently. Quiet building, reasonable price. I called and left a message. Then I called my doctor and made an appointment for my back. A proper one for myself, not squeezed between errands or missed entirely because someone needed me home. Then I sat down with a pad of paper and made a list. It was short, but it felt enormous. Find housing, retrieve stored items from Daniel's garage, change mailing address, cancel Emily's gym auto renewal from my card, keep the key. The last item surprised me. I didn't mean to write it, but I looked at it and didn't cross it out. That afternoon, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Emily. I let it go to voicemail. Listened later while sipping tea. Her voice was clipped, tight with control. "Miriam, we need to talk. This isn't how adults handle things. We had an arrangement. Please call back." I didn't. Instead, I turned to Evelyn and asked if we could go for a walk. We strolled slowly, both of us wrapped in scarves and silence, passing familiar streets with unfamiliar peace. She didn't ask what I would do next. She just slipped her arm through mine and said, "About damn time." 2 days passed before Daniel showed up in person. It was late afternoon. Evelyn and I had just returned from the grocery store. We stood in her narrow kitchen, unpacking items onto the counter. She was talking about how avocados had tripled in price when the doorbell rang. I froze. She looked at me. "You expecting someone?" "No," I said, already knowing who it was. I opened the door. Daniel stood there, jacket unzipped, eyes tired, lips pressed in a way that tried to look calm, but didn't quite succeed. He looked older than he had 3 days ago. Or maybe I was just seeing him clearly for the first time in a long time. "Hi," he said. "Hi." We stared at each other in silence. "Can I come in?" he asked finally. I hesitated, then stepped aside. Evelyn raised an eyebrow from the kitchen, then disappeared upstairs without a word. She'd always known when to exit the stage. Daniel stood awkwardly in the small living room, looking out of place among the crocheted throws and old cat figurines. He glanced at the couch. "You're staying here?" "For now." He nodded. "It's just a bit sudden, Mom." It wasn't sudden, I said. It just looked that way from your side. He winced. Look, I know what I said was harsh. I was frustrated. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. You meant it exactly the way it sounded, I said quietly. He sighed and sat down, rubbing his hands together. Emily's upset. I almost laughed. Emily's upset? She says the kids are confused. They keep asking where you are. I'm sure she found a way to explain it. She told them you were visiting a friend. Well, I said, at least that's not a lie. He looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw something raw in his eyes. Not guilt, not quite, but maybe the beginning of recognition. I didn't think it was that bad, he said. You never said anything. Because I didn't know how to, I answered. Because every time I tried, it turned into how hard things were for you, or for Emily, or for the kids. There was never room for my words. He was silent. You used to call me after work just to chat, I continued. You used to ask how I was. When did that stop? I don't know. You stopped seeing me, Daniel, I said. You saw what I did, but not who I was. He leaned back, looked up at the ceiling like the answer might be written there. I thought we were all just doing our best. You were doing what was convenient. I was disappearing. He sat forward. So what happens now? Are you going to stay here forever? Cut us out? I shook my head. I don't want to cut anyone out, but I'm not coming back to be your invisible help. That's not fair, he said again. I looked at him. Fair would have been letting me be a grandmother, not your backup wife, not your full-time unpaid staff. Just someone who could love her grandkids without breaking her back. He looked down. I've already started looking for a place, I said. I'll be moving into my own apartment by the end of the month. Mom, I held up a hand. Don't. Don't try to make this about how hard it will be without me. I know it will be. That's not my responsibility to fix. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. After a moment, he nodded. Okay. Okay, I echoed. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a key, the red-ribboned spare. You took this. I did. He held it out. Here. I didn't move. I want you to have it, he said, quieter now. I was going to ask for it back. Emily insisted. But I want you to have it, in case you ever want to come back. As a guest. As my mother. I took the key. Not because I needed it, but because I finally understood what it meant to hold something and not owe anyone anything. We sat in silence for a few more seconds. I'll walk you out, I said. At the door, he turned and looked at me. I miss you. I nodded. That's a start. And then he was gone. I closed the door slowly, leaned my forehead against the wood. Evelyn appeared behind me. Well, she said, that looked human. I laughed, a short, surprised laugh that turned into a sob halfway through. She pulled me into a hug, awkward and firm. Don't let him off the hook too easy, she said. I won't. Later that evening, I opened my purse and looked at the key in my palm. I turned it over once, twice, then placed it in a small ceramic dish on the nightstand. It no longer meant obligation. It no longer meant sacrifice. It just meant choice. The apartment was smaller than I expected, but the light poured in from the east-facing windows like a promise. It's nothing fancy, the landlord had warned me over the phone, but it's quiet, and the neighbors keep to themselves. That was all I wanted. The building stood at the end of a cul-de-sac, red brick and plain, with ivy creeping up one side like it had forgotten it was just a place for people to pass through. When I stepped inside for the first time, My fingers brushed the narrow walls of the entryway, and I felt something I hadn't in years. Privacy. No dishes in the sink that weren't mine, no baby monitor ticking, no hurried footsteps overhead, just the steady hum of a radiator and the weight of my own breath. The first night I slept there, I didn't set an alarm. I didn't have to. I woke when the light reached the bed, and not because someone shouted from the hallway or banged a pot. I lay still for a while, listening to the creak of the building, the unfamiliar hush. It was like meeting silence again after a long separation. I didn't unpack much that day. Just the basics. Clothes, toiletries, the 2 framed photos I had brought from the den, Daniel as a child and Robert smiling in that jacket of his. I placed them on the small shelf by the kitchen window next to a mug I bought at the thrift store down the street. It read, "You survived everything so far. You'll survive this too." By noon, I was hungry, but not for food. I wanted movement. I needed a rhythm again, one that belonged to me. So I walked to the library. It was 5 blocks away, nestled between a bakery and a closed-down tailor shop. A modest building with peeling paint and a cracked stone bench out front. I hadn't had a library card in over a decade. The librarian, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a soft voice, smiled when I asked. "First time in a while?" she said. "Yes," I replied, "and first time on my own terms." She didn't ask what I meant, just handed me the form. I left with 2 books, 1 novel, 1 cookbook, and a sense that I'd just recovered a part of myself I hadn't even known was missing. Later, I wandered into the cafe next door. It was small, cluttered, full of overgrown plants and mismatched chairs. The kind of place where people come to write, to linger, to be unnoticed. The young man behind the counter had a beard like a forest and hands inked with line drawings. "What can I get you?" he asked. "Just a tea," I said. He nodded, then paused. "You new around here?" I smiled. "Something like that." "Welcome," he said, and meant it. I took my cup to a corner table, opened the novel, and read for almost an hour without interruption. No one asked me to pick up anyone, fold anything, explain why the potatoes were overcooked. I lost track of time. And when I looked up and saw the sun had moved across the floor, I didn't panic. This was mine. Back in the apartment that evening, I sat by the window and dialed a number I hadn't used in months. Voicemail picked up. "Hi, sweetie," I said after the beep. "It's Grandma. Just wanted to say I miss you. Hope you're doing well in school. I'm in a new place now. When your dad thinks it's okay, maybe you can come visit. I'd love that." I hung up and placed the phone down gently. No expectations. Just a message sent out into the world like a paper boat on a pond. I made myself dinner. Nothing elaborate, just pasta with garlic and olive oil. I poured a glass of water, sat at the table, and lit a candle. For no reason. For every reason. The silence was no longer empty. It was full of space for me. Later, I took a long bath, letting the heat work its way into the places that always ached. I didn't rush. There was no reason to. Afterward, wrapped in a robe Evelyn had insisted I take, it's old like us but still soft, I padded across the apartment and sat at the small desk by the window. I opened a fresh notebook and wrote across the first page. Day 1. Not someone's burden, just myself. I underlined it twice. Then I looked out the window at the quiet street, the streetlights just flickering on, and felt something shift. It wasn't joy, not yet. But it was the clearing away of fog. Not sadness either, just the steady return of myself. It was nearly a week before I heard from anyone in that house again. Not Daniel, not Emily, Not even the children. The silence wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was careful. As if they were waiting for me to make the first move. As if I was the one who'd made things difficult by leaving, and now it was my job to smooth everything over. But I had nothing left to smooth. The apartment was still half bare. A few rugs, my clothes folded neatly in a closet with no one else's laundry to crowd them. The television hadn't even been turned on. I liked it that way. I didn't need noise. I needed time. On the 7th day, the phone rang. I was making tea. The good kind, loose leaf, a little lavender in the blend. When the screen lit up and I saw the name, my heart tightened in a way I hadn't expected. Oliver, my grandson. I wiped my hands and picked up. Grandma? His voice was uncertain, like he wasn't sure what world he was dialing into. Hi, sweetheart. Are you okay? I closed my eyes. I am now. Dad said you were visiting a friend, but you didn't call, and Mom seemed mad whenever I asked about you. I sat down. I left Oliver. I moved out. Because of something we did? No, baby, not because of you. A long pause. I could hear the quiet hum of a TV in the background, the muffled clatter of dishes. I miss you. My throat caught. I miss you too. Can I come see you? I'd like that very much, I said. But we have to let your parents figure out how they feel about it. It's complicated right now. Why? He asked. Because your mother never saw me as more than a free convenience. Because your father forgot how to be a son. Because I let it all happen. Instead, I said, sometimes grown-ups forget how to be kind. And then they need time to remember. Another pause. I remember, he said. You made me pancakes that looked like dinosaurs. I laughed softly. Yes, I did. They didn't taste like dinosaurs, though. Maybe next time I'll do better. Promise? I promise. When we hung up, I sat at the table with my tea going cold, the smile on my face as real as the ache in my chest. Children forgive more easily than adults, but they also see more than we think. I'd always suspected Oliver knew things weren't quite right in that house. Not terrible, not dramatic, just not warm. The next day, I got a letter. A real one. It was tucked in my mailbox, written in crayon, folded 3 times, and sealed with a sticker of a lopsided unicorn. Inside, Dear Grandma, please come back, or let me come to you. I miss how your house smelled. I miss you. Love, Oliver. P.S. I hid the blue car in your purse the last day. You didn't find it yet. I opened my handbag, and sure enough, there it was. A tiny toy car, wedged between my tissues, and a cough drop. I held it in my palm for a long time. I didn't cry. Not quite. But something inside softened in a way it hadn't since I packed that suitcase. That evening, I wrote a note back. Dear Oliver, I found the blue car. Sneaky boy. Thank you for your letter. I miss you too. I can't come back to the house right now, but maybe one day you can visit me here. We'll have dinosaur pancakes again. Love, Grandma. P.S. Bring the red car next time. They can race. I didn't know if Emily would let him read it, but I wrote it anyway, put it in an envelope, walked it to the mailbox in my slippers, let it go. The call came 2 days later. Early evening. I was chopping onions, halfway through a soup recipe I hadn't made in years, the kind that required time, layers, attention, like I had again now. When the phone buzzed and I saw Daniel's name, I let it ring once, twice, 3 times before answering. Mom, he said, voice tight. Yes. We need to talk. I turned off the stove. Are you asking or demanding? A pause. I'm asking. I sat down at the small kitchen table. All right, Daniel, talk. He didn't start with an apology. He never did. Instead, "Emily's upset you're writing to Oliver. She thinks it's confusing him." I closed my eyes, counted to 3. "Did you read his letter?" I asked. "What?" "The one he sent me. Did you read it?" He hesitated. "Emily did?" So, second-hand concern, as usual. "Mom, no, you asked to talk, so listen." The silence on the line felt like a held breath. "I didn't leave because of one sentence. Though it was a sharp one," I began. "I left because I'd been disappearing in your house for 3 years. Because my health didn't matter. Because my time wasn't mine. Because kindness was replaced by expectation." I could hear him swallow. "I gave and gave, Daniel. And I would have kept giving if someone, anyone, had once said, 'Mom, are you all right?' Or even, 'Thank you.' But instead, I got schedules and silence. I got told I was just taking up space." His voice was low. "I didn't mean it that way." "Then how did you mean it?" He was quiet. "I did all of it because I love you," I continued. "But love isn't a blank check, and it doesn't mean I stop being a person." Another pause. Then, "We were drowning, Mom. 2 kids, work, life. You were the only thing holding it all together. And not one of you noticed I was sinking too." He sighed. "So what now? You cut us off?" "No," I said calmly. "I just stopped volunteering to be erased. You could have told me. I tried. You weren't listening." He didn't argue. That alone was new. "Oliver misses you," he said after a moment. "He doesn't understand why you're not around." "I'm still here," I said. "He has my address. He has my voice. I'm just not coming back to be your safety net." "And Emily?" he asked. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "That's your marriage to figure out. She wants things the way they were." "I know," I said. "But I don't." Silence again. A different kind. The kind that comes when someone realizes they're not going to win the argument, because it was never an argument to begin with. It was truth. "I don't know how to fix this," he said quietly. "I'm not asking you to," I replied. "I'm just asking you not to make it harder." He let out a slow breath. Okay, I echoed. "I'll talk to Emily," he said. "About Oliver, the letters, the visits." "I hope you do." I was about to end the call when he added, "You sound different. I feel different." He didn't ask what that meant. I don't think he wanted to know. When I hung up, the kitchen felt warmer. The soup simmered gently. I stirred it slowly, the scent of garlic and thyme rising with the steam. No one else was coming home to eat it, but that was fine. I was still worth feeding. That night, I sat at my desk and wrote another note to Oliver. Not because I owed him an explanation, but because he deserved a voice that wasn't filtered through tension. Dear Oliver, grown-ups sometimes forget how to say sorry. But I want you to know, you didn't do anything wrong. I'm in a new place now, and I'm okay. And I love you, always. Love, Grandma. P.S. I hope the blue car is winning. I signed the lease on a rainy Tuesday morning. The landlord, Mr. Keene, was a small, soft-spoken man with fingers stained from newspaper ink. He offered me a handshake and said, "Welcome home?" And I nearly cried in the hallway. The apartment was modest. 2 rooms, a kitchenette, a window that looked out onto a small courtyard with a stubborn tree that had grown sideways before pushing up into the sky. The walls needed paint, the closet door stuck a little, and the shower took 10 minutes to warm. But it was mine. I paid the deposit with a check in my own name. I filled out the forms myself. No one hovered over my shoulder. No one questioned my decision. No one called to ask why I didn't choose something closer or cheaper or temporary. And as I stepped inside, holding the small box Evelyn had insisted I take for good luck, I realized something simple and staggering. I hadn't made a decision for myself in years. Not really. Everything had been for someone else. Moving in with Daniel, changing doctors to fit around school pickup, canceling travel plans because the baby had colic. I had been accommodating, always, endlessly accommodating. Now, I had a front door with a lock I controlled, a key I didn't have to return to anyone, a calendar with only my appointments on it. That first afternoon, I hung up curtains I'd found in a clearance bin, yellow, with tiny birds stitched into the hem. I didn't choose them for anyone else's taste. I chose them because they made the light feel warmer. I made tea and drank it standing by the window, watched as the wind shook the branches of that crooked tree, leaves spiraling to the pavement like loose thoughts finally landing. I was still learning how to fill time that wasn't taken from me. Some days I woke up and expected to hear the baby crying. My hand reached for the monitor that was no longer there. Muscle memory, like grief, takes time to fade. But other days, I woke slowly, made eggs, sat on the floor and stretched my legs without interruption, read, walked to the market just to browse, just because I could. I bought a small plant, a succulent, hard to kill, and named her Ruth. She lived on the windowsill beside my notebook. I didn't expect her to thrive, but she did anyway. One afternoon, I stood in the middle of the room and realized I could put the furniture wherever I wanted. I moved the table to the corner, put a chair by the window, rearranged the shelf to fit only what I loved. Not what matched, not what made sense to guests, just what made sense to me. It was a quiet kind of joy. And slowly, without notice, I began to feel like a woman again. Not a utility, not a fixture, not a placeholder. Just a woman with soft socks and a working kettle, and a list of things she wanted to do. One of those things was seeing my doctor, the same woman I used to cancel on 3 appointments in a row because the kids had the flu or Daniel needed the car. She examined my spine, asked questions I hadn't been asked in years, took her time, listened. "You've been pushing too hard," she said gently. "Your back needs rest, support, not more lifting, not more long days standing." "I know," I said, and for once, I did. We made a plan. Exercises, gentle walking, no lifting toddlers, no running after spilled juice. Just care. For me. That night, I took the heating pad out of its box and plugged it in by the chair. Sat with it for 30 minutes, eyes closed, the warmth sinking deep. It felt like an apology I owed myself. Later, I opened the notebook, wrote, Day 10. My body is not a resource. It's a place I live in. I need to care for it the way I care for others. I underlined that one 3 times. The next morning, I got a call from the library. They were looking for volunteers, older adults, preferably, to help with the children's reading hour. I smiled into the phone. I'd love to, but only on Wednesdays. Choice. Again, not obligation. When I hung up, I put on my shoes, grabbed my coat, and walked into the morning sun. My back still ached. But for the first time in years, it was on my terms. The first time Oliver visited my new apartment, he stood in the hallway for a full minute, just looking around. "This is it?" he asked, eyes wide. "This is it," I smiled. "It's small." "It's enough," I said, and opened the door wide. "Come in." He stepped over the threshold cautiously, like he was entering a place that wasn't just new, but sacred. His backpack bounced on his back, full of books and a Tupperware Emily had insisted he bring. Pasta, because kids need something real to eat, she'd said, in the note Daniel slipped into my mailbox. It was her way of reminding me who still held the reins. But not today. Today was mine. Oliver dropped his backpack on the couch and turned in a circle. Where's the TV? I don't have one. No TV? Nope. He blinked. So what do we do? I walked to the kitchen, pulled a tray from the counter. On it, a stack of old board games, 2 paper cups, a bowl of popcorn, and a tiny toy car with a note taped to the hood. Let's race again. Love, Grandma. His face lit up. We played for 2 hours. Connect 4. Then cards. Then we tried to make a paper airplane that could circle the whole room, but it kept crashing into Ruth the plant, who took it well. He asked questions. Why did you leave? I didn't lie. Because I was tired, my back hurt, and no one was listening to me. He frowned. I didn't know. You weren't supposed to fix it, I said, reaching across the table to touch his hand. You're a child. That's not your job. He nodded slowly. But I missed you. A lot. I missed you too. We didn't linger there. Children know when the air gets too heavy. He moved on to a new question. Can I come next week too? If your parents say yes. What if they don't? Then we'll figure it out another way. Later, we baked cookies. I let him crack the egg, and half the shell ended up in the bowl. We laughed so hard, I nearly forgot I used to live in silence. When the cookies were in the oven, he wandered over to the bookshelf and pulled down a photo frame. That's Grandpa? Yes, I said, surprised by how steady my voice was. His name was Robert. He looks kind. He was. Oliver stared at the picture a long moment. Did he ever live here? No, I said. He died before I moved here, but I think he would have liked this place. Why? Because it's quiet. And it's mine. When Daniel came to pick him up, he didn't come to the door. He waited in the car. I watched from the window as Oliver waved and ran down the steps, backpack swinging, cookie crumbs still on his cheek. Daniel looked up once. Our eyes met. He gave a small nod. I gave nothing back. Not yet. That evening, I cleared the table, washed the dishes, and sat by the window. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, and the tree in the courtyard swayed gently. No voices, no demands, just the echo of a child's laughter and the faint scent of vanilla. I opened my notebook. Day 11. A visit is not a transaction. It's a gift. I don't have to earn it. I just have to show up. Then I lit a candle. Not because it was special, but because it was enough. Because I was enough. They didn't call ahead. Didn't ask if I was free. One knock at the door, firm, fast, unmistakable, and there they were. Daniel in a wool coat he hadn't buttoned. Emily beside him, arms crossed, holding her purse like a shield. They both looked like people who had practiced their lines on the drive over. I didn't move to invite them in. Hi, Daniel said. Emily nodded once, eyes scanning the hallway behind me, as if waiting to catch some failure. A mess, an open bill, a reason to reassert control. Can we come in? He asked. I stepped aside without a word. They walked in, looked around, said nothing. I had nothing to hide. The place was clean. The kettle was still warm. There was a book on the chair and a folded blanket by the window. They sat down stiffly, close together, like passengers on the same late train, but not speaking to each other. Emily went first. We wanted to talk to you in person. I nodded. She glanced at Daniel, then back at me. It's been complicated. For all of us. Another nod. We feel like you made a very sudden decision, she said, voice tight. And it put us in a difficult spot. There it was. I didn't make it suddenly, I replied. I made it quietly, over a long time. Daniel looked up. Mom, she's not saying you didn't have the right. Just that maybe we could have handled things differently if we'd known how serious it was. I took a breath. You knew. He opened his mouth, closed it again. Emily shifted. We didn't expect you to. Leave, I finished for her. No, I know. I wasn't supposed to. I was supposed to stay, endure, be convenient. That's not fair, she said. Neither was using me as a full-time nanny and housekeeper without once asking what I needed. She stiffened. You never said no. No, I said. I didn't. Because I loved you all. And I thought that was the same as being needed. Silence. Daniel cleared his throat. Oliver misses you. I know. He's been writing letters. I've been writing back. Emily looked like she wanted to object, but Daniel held up a hand. I'm not here to fight, he said. We came to ask if you'd consider coming back, even part-time. I looked at them. Two adults who once stood in front of me in wedding clothes, nervous and grateful. I had given them my blessing, my time, my home, and still they didn't understand. No, I said. Emily sat up straighter. Excuse me? I said no, I repeated calmly. I won't be coming back. Daniel leaned forward. Not even for a few hours a week. We could pay you, set boundaries, make it more fair. It's not about money, I said. It's about value. We're offering respect, Emily said quickly. I smiled, slow and sad. Offering respect now, after taking it for granted, isn't respect. It's negotiation. They sat in silence again. The kettle clicked off behind us, finished boiling. I love Oliver, I said. I will always be his grandmother. But I won't trade my peace for proximity. Daniel swallowed hard. So that's it? I stood up. That's it. Emily rose too, her purse clutched tighter. You don't have to be cruel. I'm not, I said. I'm just no longer willing to be erased. They moved toward the door. Before they stepped out, Daniel turned. His voice was softer. If he asks again, about visiting? Let him come. He nodded. Emily didn't speak. They left. I closed the door behind them, locked it, leaned against the wood, and breathed. Not triumph, not relief, just clarity. That night, I poured the hot water, watched the steam rise, and thought about how many times I'd said yes when I wanted to say no. How many times I'd said, it's fine, when it wasn't. No more. I opened my notebook. Day 12. Saying no isn't selfish. It's sacred. Then I turned off the lights, left the candle burning, and let the silence have me. Oliver started coming every other Saturday. Daniel would drop him off without stepping inside. He'd park across the street, wait in the car, engine running, a hand resting on the steering wheel like he might need to flee at any moment. I didn't wave. He didn't either. It was a quiet exchange. A child passed from habit into love. Oliver never asked about the silence between his parents and me. Children sense where not to press. Instead, he'd run up the steps, backpack bouncing, cheeks pink with wind, arms outstretched like I was the only solid thing he trusted. He always brought something. A toy, a drawing. Once, a rock he claimed looked like a turtle if you squinted. I kept it anyway. It sits on the shelf beside Ruth next to the framed photo of Robert, as if it's always belonged there. We didn't make plans. We just lived into the day. Pancakes sometimes. A walk if the weather allowed. Stories, mine, his, ones we made up. He asked more about Grandpa, about when his dad was little, about what I did before I lived in that basement room. That's what he called it now. The basement room. I told him about books I used to love, about the library job I'd almost taken after high school, but didn't, because Daniel came along, and life took its detour. I didn't say it with bitterness, just with truth. Truth held gently. He told me about school, how math was boring and his friend Lucas sometimes lied about things just to make people laugh. How Emily cried in the car one day and thought he didn't notice. How Daniel stayed up late, staring at his phone like it might hand him a better version of life. I listened, not to fix, just to hear. And when it was time to go, he always hugged me twice. Once at the door and once at the bottom of the stairs, like he didn't want to let the day end completely. I started keeping a drawer for him, just a few things, a puzzle, some crayons, socks he always forgot. I never called it his room, but he understood. It was space carved out just for him, space freely given, not taken. Other things changed too. Evelyn started stopping by more often, always with something in hand, cookies, a newspaper clipping, once a terrible ceramic bird she found at a garage sale. "It's hideous," she declared, "and you deserve it." I put it by the window. It makes me laugh every morning. The library offered me a small part-time position, just helping with reading groups and shelving. I said yes, not because I needed to stay busy, but because I wanted to feel useful on my own terms. Some afternoons, I walk to the cafe, the one with the wild plants and chipped mugs. The barista knows my order now. Miriam's blend, he calls it. Black tea with a splash of milk and a pinch of cinnamon. I don't correct him. Let him think it's something special. And it is. One evening, just before closing, I sat there alone with my tea and my notebook. The lights were dimmed, music low, the kind that sounds like old roads and open skies. I wrote, "Day 13. I was never meant to live only in service. My hands know how to hold more than responsibility." I paused, tapped my pen, then added, "And my voice still knows how to speak without permission." It wasn't anger I felt. It was something quieter, steadier. A return. Outside, the streetlights blinked on. I pulled on my coat, paid my bill, and walked home past rows of windows glowing with lives I didn't envy. I didn't want their noise, their clutter, their tangled expectations. I wanted my cup of tea, my drawer of crayons, my crooked plant, my sacred, unbothered peace. And I had it. It was a quiet Sunday morning when the letter arrived. No return address, just my name in tight, elegant script. The kind taught in Catholic school, or by grandmothers with high standards. I turned it over in my hands, sensing it wasn't from Oliver. His handwriting still danced unevenly across the page, full of extra loops and crooked lines. I opened it slowly. Inside, just one page. A folded sheet of stationery that smelled faintly of soap and something floral. "Miriam, I'm not good at saying things out loud. I think you've always known that. You leaving changed things, more than you realize. I told myself for years that I was doing everything right. Work, kids, marriage, and that the rest would sort itself out. I didn't see how much I was asking you to disappear. I'm sorry. Not just for what I said that night. For all the small ways I stopped being your son and started treating you like a safety net. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me. I don't even know if I deserve that. But I want Oliver to grow up knowing how to treat people with care. I want him to remember that when someone walks away, you don't wait for them to fix it. You go to them. So this is me, coming to you. If you ever feel ready, I'd like to come by. Not to ask for anything, just to visit, just to sit. Maybe we could have tea. Love, Daniel." I folded the letter and placed it on the table. sat down, let the silence grow around me. There was no anger in me, not anymore. Just a strange softness, like something bruised had finally been left alone long enough to heal. I didn't rush to respond. I went about my day. I watered Ruth. I swept the floor. I made a small soup and added too much time, then laughed at myself. The kind of laugh that comes when you realize you're allowed to make small, harmless mistakes, because no one's watching, and no one needs it perfect. Later that afternoon, I pulled out a sheet of paper and began to write. Daniel, thank you for your letter. It mattered. I'm not ready for a visit yet, but I'm not closed to the idea. I need time to keep being who I've become without slipping back into who I was in your house. I think you understand that now. You're right about Oliver. He needs to learn care, and that starts with how he sees us treat each other. So, maybe someday, yes, we'll have tea. For now, I'm here, and I'm okay. Love, Mom. I sealed the envelope, wrote his name, and walked it to the postbox. The air was crisp. Leaves skittered along the sidewalk like children late for school. No fanfare, no announcement. Just one letter among many, but different. That night, I sat at my window with my usual tea and wrote in my notebook. Day 14. Healing isn't loud. Sometimes it arrives folded in an envelope, saying just enough. I looked at the letter on the table one more time before turning off the light, and I smiled. Not because it was fixed, but because something finally had the room to begin. The key still sits in the ceramic dish by the door. Not because I intend to use it, not because I'm waiting for an invitation, but because it reminds me of something I had forgotten. I have always held the power to leave. I just didn't believe I was allowed. Now I know better. My days are quiet, steady. I wake without dread. I move through the rooms of my little apartment with purpose, not urgency. The walls are lined with things I chose, not things I inherited, not things given with strings, not clutter meant to prove worth. Just what I love. Ruth, the plant, keeps growing sideways toward the window. I've stopped trying to straighten her. Some things bloom best when left to lean. Oliver still visits. We've started writing stories together. Short tales about dragons who refuse to guard treasure and instead become bakers, or owls who open libraries in trees. He always asks if the characters can be a little bit weird. I always say yes. He never calls this place your apartment. He calls it your house. There's a difference. Last week, I stood in front of the mirror and really looked. The creases around my mouth, the soft line of my jaw, the shoulders that once carried a household now only carry a coat. I didn't frown. I didn't lift my chin to fix the angle. I just looked and whispered, "You made it." I started going to a chair yoga class at the rec center. Evelyn came with me once, laughed so hard when she fell sideways that the instructor had to stop the session. We still quote her fall, like it's a great tragedy. "Tell my cats I loved them," she says dramatically, falling onto the couch. She brought over a second bird statue last week. "This one's worse," she grinned. I keep them both. Sometimes Daniel texts, nothing urgent, just, "Oliver lost his red car? Did he leave it with you?" Or, "I remembered that pie you used to make. Miss it?" He never pushes, never assumes. We're learning each other again, slowly, cautiously, without shame. And Emily, well, some people grow, some people learn, and some people just step back and let the rest of us do what we must. That's enough for now. I've been thinking about how many women like me are out there. Quiet, hurting, helping, hoping someone notices. I want to tell them, you are not just background. You are not just a solution. You are not too old, too late, or too tired. You have the right to rest, to speak, to leave. And you have the right to stay, but only if it feeds you, too. I light a candle most nights, even when I'm alone, especially when I'm alone. It's not for ambiance. It's a declaration. I'm still here. I'm still me. And if you're reading this, and something in it sounds like your own quiet thought, your own echo, your own unlived sentence, let this be your sign. You can go. You can start. And you do not need permission. If this story spoke to you, share it. Leave a comment. Let someone else feel seen. There are more of us than you think, and we're not invisible anymore.